Imagine being 18 years old, dressed in your wedding veil, thinking you were about to celebrate the happiest day of your life, and instead being taken to a side room, stripped naked, examined by a physician with metal instruments, forced to mount a life-size wooden phallus in front of witnesses, and then having your consummation observed through an open bedroom door while scribes document every sound. You were told this was tradition. You were never warned about the statue. You were never told about Mutinus Tutinus, the god of penetration carved from polished wood. You were never told witnesses would watch. You were never told the door would stay open all night. In the next 10 minutes, you will understand what Mutinus Tutinus is, and why Christian historians call it unspeakable. You will understand why your mother wept while braiding your hair. You will understand why Roman marriage was never about love, it was about verification. This is not myth. This was law. This happened to thousands of women for 8 centuries. Augustine, founder of Christian theology, wrote about this ritual in 426 CE with such disgust he could barely finish the paragraph. He called it pollution of the tongue to even speak of it. Arnobius said the details were too vile for decent mouths. Lactantius refused to describe it, writing only that mentioning it brought shame. And yet it was mandatory. What they tried to bury, we will uncover. What Roman historians refused to write, we will reveal. Before we descend into what happened to Livia on her wedding night in 89 CE, if you want more suppressed histories, subscribe and turn on notifications. Once you understand what happened to this 18-year-old girl, you will never see Rome the same way. And when you reach the moment that disturbs you most, and you will comment which part shocked you hardest and where you are watching from. The year was 89 CE. Dawn broke over Rome. Livia Tersa woke to her mother weeping in the next room. Soft, broken sobs. Livia thought they were tears of joy. They were not. They were mourning what would be taken from her daughter before tomorrow's sunrise. Mourning what she herself had endured 22 years ago and could not prevent. But Livia did not know this yet. She counted her breaths the way her mother taught her when she feared thunderstorms. She did not know the storm was already here. The preparations began at dawn. Older women arrived, aunts, cousins, neighbors. They brought scented oil, saffron flowers, white wool ribbons. They moved with practiced efficiency, but spoke in whispers. One woman, Helena, braided Livia's hair with trembling hands. When Livia asked why, Helena whispered, "You will understand soon enough." That phrase, "you will understand," would echo all day, like a funeral bell. But what Livia was about to discover would shatter even her growing dread. They dressed her in the tunica recta, woven in one piece to symbolize unity. Over it went the flame-colored veil that marked her as a bride. Around her waist they tied the knot of Hercules that only her husband could untie. With each layer, Livia felt less like a person and more like property being wrapped for delivery. Her father had arranged her marriage to Gaius Pontius, a grain merchant aged 43. Livia had met him twice. When she asked her mother about marriage, her mother looked away and said only, "You will survive it. Not enjoy. Not love. Survive." As if marriage were a battle, the ceremony unfolded traditionally. The proniba joined Livia's hand with Gaius's hand. Witnesses watched. Scribes recorded dowry amounts on wax tablets. Children scattered walnuts. Musicians played. Everything seemed normal. But Livia noticed something disturbing. Every older woman present watched her not with joy, but with pity, recognition. They had all been lambs once. They remembered the knife. The feast stretched through afternoon. Tables sagged with roasted pork, honeyed wine, laughter that sounded forced. Gaius sat beside her discussing grain prices. He barely looked at her. When the sun descended, the pronuba stood. The room went silent. This was the deductio, the procession to her new home. Torches were lit, but what Livia did not know was that the deductio was barely the beginning. The examination was humiliating, but it was not the worst part. They walked through Roman streets as twilight deepened. Torch flames threw shadows on marble walls. Crowds cheered. Children sang crude songs about fertility that made Livia blush. When they reached Gaius's villa, he lifted her over the threshold. The guests flooded inside. But the Pronuba gripped Livia's arm hard enough to bruise. "Before the celebration," she said quietly, "there are legal formalities. Come." Formalities? Her mother had mentioned nothing. The Pronuba led her past laughing guests, down a corridor, into a cold chamber. Marble walls gleamed in lamplight. A wooden table stood draped in white linen. Beside it waited a grey-haired man with a leather bag. Inside, metal instruments gleamed like predator eyes. "This is Decimus, a physician," the Pronuba said. "The first examination must be completed before the ceremony continues." Examination? Livia's heart hammered. She could not speak. Decimus stepped forward. His voice was clinical. "Remove your undergarments and lie on the table." Livia froze. The Pronuba's grip tightened. "This is law. Every bride is examined. Your virginity must be documented. Your body must be verified. After consummation, you will be examined again, to prove the marriage was completed." The words crashed over her. Documented. Verified. Decimus was not there for her health. He was there to inventory her, to measure her, to reduce her body to a document filed with tax records. In that moment, Livia understood. She was not a person. She was evidence. Her hands shook as she removed fabric layers. Cold air raised goosebumps. The marble was ice against her back. She heard everything. The clink of instruments, Decimus breathing, the scratch of the Pronuba's sandals. She stared at ceiling cracks. 1, 2, 3. Anything to be elsewhere. The examination lasted 12 minutes. It felt like 12 hours. When it ended, Decimus washed his hands and wrote on parchment. "Virgo intacta," he murmured. "Intact virgin." Her body reduced to 2 Latin words. The Pronuba helped her dress. "The worst is behind you," she whispered. But her eyes said, "You have no idea." Slaves brought warm water and oil. They washed her, murmuring prayers, but their eyes were pitying, knowing. They had seen this before. The Pronuba led her back to the main chamber. The guests had left. Only witnesses remained. 3 older women, 2 scribes, and Gaius standing stiffly by the wall. And in the corner, draped in black cloth, stood a wooden figure. Livia had been too distracted to notice it earlier. Now, as the Pronuba guided her toward it, everyone turned to watch. The witnesses leaned forward. The scribes prepared to write. Even Gaius looked away, jaw clenched. Everyone knew what was beneath that cloth. Everyone except her. The Pronuba gripped her arm firmly. "You must greet Mutinus Tutinus," she said formally. "You must seek his blessing before your husband may approach. The gods must witness your submission." Mutinus Tutinus. Livia had never heard this name. Why was everyone watching so intently? Her hands trembled as she reached for the fabric. The room held its breath. She pulled it away, and understood why no one had prepared her. Standing before her was a wooden statue carved with anatomical precision into the shape of a massive phallus. Not a small charm, not a crude garden sculpture. It was deliberate, detailed, exact, nearly 4 feet tall, thick as a forearm, polished smooth by countless hands. Every vein carved with obscene precision. It was revolting. It was sacred. It was law, and the Pronuba was already positioning her toward it. "Sit," the Pronuba commanded. Livia's mind reeled. "Sit? Where?" The horrible realization crashed over her. The Pronuba adjusted her hips, positioning her body. According to ancestral custom, she explained like discussing weather, brides must mount the sacred symbol to demonstrate submission and readiness. This proves to the gods and to witnesses that you accept your role as wife. Augustine, writing in the City of God in 426 CE, described this with barely controlled fury. Roman brides, he wrote, were required to sit upon the obscene member before their husbands approached. And this occurred before witnesses. He called it an abomination that polluted the tongue to speak of. Arnobius, in Against the Pagans around 300 CE, claimed brides were forced to straddle the cymbal while husbands watched. He refused explicit details, writing the particulars were too vile for Christian mouths. Lactantius mentioned it only briefly, saying even referencing it brought dishonor. Yet all three confirmed the same truth. It happened. It was real. It was required. But to Rome, it was not shameful. It was tradition. It was verification. They called it sacred. The law called it mandatory. The official explanation was fertility blessing. Mutinus Tutinus was a god of procreation. By engaging with this symbol, brides invited divine favor. But the unspoken purpose was darker, breaking her will, demonstrating total submission before legal witnesses, preparing her for what came next, consummation that would also be witnessed, documented, filed in state archives. Livia looked at Gaius. He stared at the floor. She looked at the witnesses, stone-faced, ready to testify in court. She looked at the pronuba. No emotion, only duty. There was no escape, only compliance. What followed was never described fully by decent Roman authors, but scribes recorded it. Witnesses observed. The pronuba gave instructions. When it was done, they nodded acknowledgement. The ritual was complete. The bride had been verified, but the night was only beginning. What came next would be witnessed in even more intimate detail. Slaves brought water again, washing her thoroughly. The pronuba whispered prayers. Then Decimus returned for the second examination, verifying the ritual had been performed correctly, that physical signs matched earlier documentation, that she was, by Roman logic, prepared. Everything occurred with witnesses present. Their testimony could be demanded in court if the marriage was challenged. Then the pronuba spoke the dreaded words, "It is time." The bedchamber was arranged as law required. The bed positioned to be seen from the doorway. That doorway would remain open all night. Oil lamps burned in corners for visibility. Incense filled the air. White linen covered the bed so evidence would be visible. Slaves waited in the corridor. Witnesses took positions near the door, close enough to observe. The pronuba would watch from the threshold, stepping forward when tradition required instruction. Everything felt staged. This was not a bedroom. It was theatre. Livia was not a bride. She was a performer in a legal ritual requiring documentation. Gaius entered. He paused, glancing at the watching pronuba, the witnesses beyond, the lamps positioned for visibility. His face showed not desire, but profound discomfort. He was 25 years older, a successful merchant. He had been married before. He knew what this night entailed. Yet even he seemed to understand this was not intimacy. It was documentation. It was verification. He was as trapped as she was, just in a different cage. What followed unfolded slowly, hour by hour, under unblinking observation. The pronuba stood at the doorway framed by lamplight. She stepped forward when tradition required instruction, when positioning needed correction. The door stayed open. Lamplight spilled into the corridor. Anyone could hear movements, voices, ritual commands. Witnesses could distinguish every sound, every rustle, every whisper, every moment. Nothing was private, nothing was meant to be. For Rome, marriage was not about love, it was about verification. Verification of virginity before, verification of consummation during, verification of heirs after, and verification required witnesses. The bedsheets might as well have been parchment, and her body the ink Rome used to finalize the contract. This was not cruelty, this was bureaucracy, and bureaucracy executed perfectly, can be more brutal than any individual malice. By dawn, the air felt heavy with exhaustion and incense. Lamps had burned low. Witnesses had remained all night, dozing in shifts, waking to observe key moments. Decimus returned at first light for the third examination. He confirmed consummation had occurred. He noted evidence. He wrote his report. The pronuba gave sworn testimony. Witnesses signed affidavits. Scribes sealed records. The legal transformation was complete. Livia Tersa was now officially a Roman wife, and for the next 43 years she would never speak of that night. Not once. Not to anyone. Until the day she broke her silence. Livia lived 43 more years. She bore 3 children. She managed her husband's household. She performed religious duties. She hosted dinners. She appeared dignified, capable, respectable. A model Roman matron. But about her wedding night, she spoke to no one. Not to sisters, not to friends, especially not to daughters, until her eldest daughter, Cornelia, turned 17. A marriage contract arrived. Livia read it. Traditional ceremony. All the ancient rituals, including Mutinus Tutinus, including witnessed consummation, including 3 examinations. Her hands shook. That night she did not sleep. She remembered the marble table, the wooden god, the open door, the watching eyes, the physician reducing her body to documentation, and she made a decision no Roman woman had made before. The next morning, without her husband's knowledge, she went to the groom's family. She requested audience with his father. When he received her, confusion plain on his face. Livia spoke words she had rehearsed all night. I will testify publicly, in the forum if necessary. I will describe my wedding night in explicit detail, every ritual, every witness, every moment. I will name the witnesses. I will name the physician. I will describe Mutinus Tutinus and what I was forced to do. I will bring shame on both families by exposing what is supposed to stay hidden. His face drained of color. The scandal would be catastrophic. Both children would become unmarriageable. Both families disgraced. Unless, Livia continued, the contract is revised. Cornelia will marry under the modern ceremony. No Mutinus Tutinus. No witnesses in the chamber. No open door. 1 examination only. Silence stretched. He was a practical man. The old rituals were already fading. The scandal would cost more than abandoning outdated traditions. 3 days later, a revised contract arrived. Simpler ceremony. Private consummation. Single examination. Cornelia married under new terms. She never knew what her mother threatened, never knew what her mother endured. It was a small victory. It changed nothing for thousands of others that year, but it was hers. For the first time since her wedding night, Livia felt something other than powerless silence. She felt defiant. Livia Tersa's name appears in 1 tax document from 147 CE, just her name, her husband's name, her children's names, her children's names. No mention of what she endured. But she was real. She lived, she survived, she resisted. And like thousands of others, she was silenced by a system that treated her body as evidence and her consent as irrelevant. Archaeological excavations at Pompeii uncovered marriage contracts referencing testatio nuptiarum witness testimony of consummation. Legal records show women suing for divorce based on witness testimony, proving the practice was actively enforced and litigated. The laws are gone. The rituals are museum curiosities. Statues of Mutinus Tutinus sit in collections with sanitized plaques about fertility worship. No mention of what brides were forced to do. But the women who endured deserve more than plaques. They deserve to be remembered. Not as property transferred, not as evidence documented, but as people who survived. As mothers who fought to save daughters. As humans whose silence was survival, not consent. If this moved you, comment what shocked you most. If you want more erased histories, subscribe. Because their silence ends here.